The mining colony on Theta 7 was cold, but it was home. Humans and Kelrath worked together there, digging valuable minerals from the frozen ground. The Kelrath looked like giant wolves that walked on two legs. They had thick fur, sharp claws, and eyes that glowed like amber in the dark. They were strong and loyal, and they cared deeply about their families. Commander Jake Morrison ran the human side of the colony. He was 45 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been on Theta 7 for 5 years, learning to trust the Kelrath and teaching them to trust humans. His assistant was Lieutenant Amy Clark, a woman with red hair and a quick smile. The Kelrath liked her because she always kept her promises. The Kelrath leader was Pack Leader Vrenthor. He was huge, even for a Kelrath, with gray fur and scars from old battles. His mate was Sarah Lynn, who had silver fur and gentle eyes. She took care of all the young ones in the colony, both Kelrath cubs and human children. Everyone trusted her with their most precious treasures. The nursery building sat at the edge of the valley between the colony and the ice mountains. It had big windows so the children could see the stars. Inside, 23 Kelrath cubs played with 4 human children. They chased each other, shared toys, and learned each other's languages. The cubs taught the human kids how to growl properly. The human children taught the cubs how to draw pictures. That morning started like any other. Danny Hayes was checking supplies in the storage building. He was 24 years old, skinny and quiet. Most people forgot he was there. He liked it that way. He had joined the colony 6 months ago, and he mostly kept to himself. He did his job, fixed broken equipment, and never caused trouble. Jake was in the command center looking at reports on his computer screen. Amy was outside, inspecting the generators that kept the colony warm. The temperature on Theta 7 never got above freezing, even in summer. Without the generators, everyone would die in hours. The Kelrath cubs were having lunch in the nursery. Sarah Lynn was feeding the smallest ones by hand. The human children sat with their favorite cubs, laughing at something one of them had said. Nobody heard the explosions from the next valley over. Nobody knew that another mining company was using illegal charges to blast through rock. The ground shook. At first, it was just a small tremor. Jake looked up from his computer. Amy grabbed a wall to steady herself. In the nursery, Sarah Lynn pulled the children closer, her ears flat against her head. Then came the roar. It sounded like the whole mountain was screaming. Jake ran to the window and saw it. A wall of white death was sliding down the mountain, picking up speed, growing bigger. The avalanche was massive, carrying tons of ice and rock straight toward the colony. Amy was thrown to the ground by the shock wave. Her radio flew from her belt and skidded across the ice. She tried to stand, but the ground kept shaking. Buildings rattled. Alarms started screaming. Everyone was running, but nobody knew where to go. The avalanche hit the northern edge of the colony like a hammer. 3 storage buildings disappeared under the ice. The communication tower snapped like a twig. And then the secondary wave, pushed forward by all that force, slammed into the nursery. The building crumpled. The windows shattered. 30 meters of ice and rock buried it completely. One moment it was there, and the next moment it was gone. Just white silence and settling dust. Jake was already running. He grabbed his emergency pack and charged out of the command center. Amy was on her feet, screaming into her broken radio. All around the colony, doors burst open as people ran toward the avalanche site. The Kelrath were faster. Vrenthor came out of his dwelling with a sound that made the humans stop in their tracks. It was a howl, but not like any wolf on Earth. It was deeper, louder, filled with pain that words could never express. Every Kelrath in the colony answered him. The sound echoed off the mountains. Raw grief carried on the frozen air. By the time Jake reached the avalanche site, 50 Kelrath were already digging. Their claws tore through ice that would have broken human tools. They worked with desperate speed, throwing chunks of frozen rock behind them. Some were crying, some were silent. All of them were digging. Jake pulled out his scanner and swept it across the avalanche field. The readings made his heart sink. The nursery was buried deep, maybe 30 meters down. The structure had collapsed. He could pick up faint life signs, but they were scattered and weak. Amy arrived with more scanning equipment and a team of human workers. They set up lights and started coordinating the dig. Human machines joined Kelrath claws. They worked together, humans and aliens united in desperate hope. Hours passed. The sun started to set. Theta 7 had short days and long, deadly nights. When darkness came, the temperature would drop to 60 below zero. The winds would start, strong enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. Anyone caught outside without shelter would be dead by morning. They kept digging. Vrenthor's claws were bleeding, but he did not stop. Sarah Lynn worked beside him, her silver fur matted with ice and dirt. The human workers operated the machines until the machines overheated and broke down. Then they grabbed shovels and kept going. Jake checked the scanners again. The life signs were getting weaker. Some had already disappeared. The cold was reaching the children through all that ice. They were dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to dig fast enough. The sun touched the horizon. The temperature dropped 5 degrees in 10 minutes. Jake looked at the readings one more time, then at the darkening sky, then at the desperate faces around him. He was a commander. He had to make the choice that would save the most lives. Vrenthor saw it in his eyes. The pack leader stopped digging and stood up slowly. His massive chest heaved with effort and grief. He looked at the ice field, then at his people, then at the coming night. "We must stop," Vrenthor said. His voice was broken glass. "The pack must survive." The words hung in the freezing air. Some of the Kelrath howled in protest. Others just collapsed where they stood. Sarah Lynn pressed her face against the ice, sobbing. Jake gave the order to fall back. The humans started gathering tools, moving slowly, like people walking away from a funeral. Amy stood frozen, tears turning to ice on her cheeks. 4 human children were under that ice. 4 children who would never go home. The Kelrath began their morning song. It was ancient and terrible, a sound their species had made for millions of years when the pack lost its young. They formed circles and sang to the darkening sky. But one human did not move. Danny Hayes stood at the edge of the dig site staring at the ice. His face showed nothing. He did not follow the others back to the warm buildings. He just stood there looking at the place where 27 children were dying in the dark. The morning song of the Kelrath filled the valley as darkness crept across the sky. It was not a sound meant for human ears. It carried the weight of evolution, of countless generations who had learned that sometimes the pack had to accept terrible losses to survive. The Kelrath stood in circles, heads thrown back, singing their grief to the stars that were beginning to appear overhead. Jake walked back to the command center with heavy steps. Each footfall felt like betrayal. He was leaving children behind, 4 human children whose parents had trusted him to keep them safe. Sophie Grant, only 5 years old, who loved to draw pictures of flowers she had never seen except in books. Marcus Bell, who wanted to be a pilot. The Chen twins, Peter and Paul, who finished each other's sentences. Amy followed him, but she kept looking back. The Kelrath were spreading out now, forming larger circles. More voices joined the song. It was their way of honoring the dead, of telling the universe that these lives had mattered. She understood the necessity of retreat. She understood the mathematics of survival, but understanding did not make it easier. The other humans moved like ghosts through the growing darkness. They headed for the heated shelters for warmth and safety, and the bitter task of writing reports that no one would want to read. Some were crying. Others looked numb beyond tears. The colony had become a place of death in the space of a few hours. Danny Hayes did not move. He stood alone at the edge of the avalanche site while everyone else retreated. The wind picked up, pulling at his jacket. The temperature was dropping fast. In an hour it would be fatal to stay outside. He did not seem to care. He tilted his head slightly as if listening to something. His eyes moved across the ice field, studying it the way a doctor might study an X-ray. He was seeing something others had missed. Or maybe he was just refusing to see the obvious truth that everyone else had accepted. Inside the command center, Jake sat down heavily in his chair. He pulled up the communication logs looking for a way to send a message to headquarters. The avalanche had destroyed their main transmitter. They had backup systems, but they were short range. It would be days before anyone knew what had happened here. He started writing the report. 27 children lost in an avalanche. Rescue attempts failed. His fingers stopped on the keyboard. How do you write that sentence? How do you reduce 27 lives to a line in a report? Amy entered the command center and stopped. Danny's still out there, Jake looked up. What? Danny Hayes. He never came back with the others. Jake checked the personnel tracker on his screen. Sure enough, there was one signal still near the avalanche site. He grabbed his radio. Hayes, this is Commander Morrison. Return to base immediately. That's an order. Static answered him. Danny either was not hearing the radio or was choosing not to answer. Jake swore and stood up. I'll go get him. Amy put a hand on his arm. Let me. She went back out into the cold. The temperature had dropped another 3 degrees. The wind was stronger now, carrying ice crystals that stung like tiny knives. She pulled her hood up and walked toward the avalanche site, following the lights that still marked where they had been digging. Danny was at the equipment shed. He had a pile of gear spread out on the ground. Climbing rope, a harness, a plasma torch for cutting through ice, thermal blankets, oxygen canisters, a medical kit. He was checking each item carefully like a man preparing for a difficult job. Danny, Amy said. The commander ordered everyone back. He did not look up. Yes, ma'am. He continued checking his equipment. You can't stay out here. The night winds are coming. I know. He started loading gear into a large backpack. Amy watched him work. She had barely spoken to Danny in the 6 months he had been on the colony. He was always polite but distant. He did his job well and never drew attention to himself. Now she was seeing a different person. This Danny moved with purpose and certainty. What are you doing? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Going after them. He tested the weight of the backpack, adjusted the straps. Danny, they're too deep. The cold has already reached them. Even if you could dig them out, they're probably already gone. He finally looked at her. His eyes were calm and clear. Maybe, but I have to try. You'll die out there. Probably. He shouldered the pack. It must have weighed 40 pounds, but he lifted it easily. Amy stepped in front of him. Listen to me. I understand what you're feeling. We all want to save them. But this is suicide. The scanners showed the nursery collapsed. The structure is unstable. One wrong move and you'll be buried too. And even if you somehow reach them, how will you get them out? There are 27 children down there. Danny was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but firm. My grandfather was a rescue worker in the Appalachian Mountains back on Earth. He taught me how to read ice and rock. My uncle was a coal miner. He taught me how to move through tight spaces and unstable structures. I've pulled people out of collapsed mines before. This is different. This is an alien planet with conditions that will kill you in minutes. Yes, ma'am. He started walking toward the avalanche site. Amy grabbed his arm. Jake will court-martial you for disobeying orders. Danny looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. I can live with that. Can you live with not trying? The question hit her like a punch. She let go of his arm. Danny walked past her toward the ice field. Amy stood there watching him go. Every logical part of her brain said to stop him, to drag him back if necessary, to save him from himself. But another part of her, a part that ran deeper than logic, knew something else. Sometimes you had to try even when trying was foolish. Sometimes the right choice was not the smart choice. She made a decision that would change everything. She grabbed a radio from her belt and followed Danny. The Kelrath saw him coming. Their morning song faltered and stopped. Frenthor stepped forward, his massive form blocking the path to the avalanche site. His eyes glowed in the darkness. His claws, still bloody from hours of digging, flexed at his sides. Human, Frenthor said in his deep voice. Your commander has ordered retreat. Why do you dishonor his word? Danny stopped but did not back away. He was less than half the size of the pack leader, a skinny human facing a warrior who could tear him apart with one swipe. But he met those amber eyes without fear. Because they're still alive down there, Danny said. And I can get them out. Frenthor's ears flattened. The pack has mourned. The choice is made. They are lost. No, Danny said simply. Not yet, Sarah Lynn approached. Her silver fur was darker where tears had frozen in it. Small human, you cannot change what is. The mountain has taken them. To go after them is to throw your life away for nothing. Danny looked at her and his expression softened slightly. Maybe it's for nothing. Maybe I'll die down there and it won't matter. But I have to try. That's what humans do. We try even when we shouldn't. We fight even when we can't win. We don't give up on our pack. He used their word deliberately. Pack, not colony, not team. Pack. Something changed in Sarah Lynn's eyes. She looked at this small, soft human with his inadequate gear and his impossible mission. She saw something that resonated with an old Kelrath value that the pack had almost forgotten in their acceptance of harsh reality. Frenthor saw it too. He studied Danny for a long moment. The wind howled around them. The temperature continued to drop. Time was running out and everyone knew it. You will die, Frenthor said. It was not a question. Yes, Danny agreed. But I'm going anyway. The pack leader's clawed hand landed on Danny's shoulder, heavy enough to make him stagger. For a heartbeat, Amy thought Vrenthor would stop him. Then the Kelrath stepped aside. Danny walked forward. The entire colony watched in silence as the small human approached the avalanche that had defeated them all. He stood at the edge of the ice field, studying it one more time. Then he tied his safety rope to a support beam that was still standing, checked his gear one last time, and stepped onto the frozen hell that had swallowed 27 children. Behind him, the Kelrath were completely silent. The morning song had stopped. They stood like statues, watching, waiting, bearing witness to something they did not fully understand but recognized as important. Amy activated her scanner and began monitoring Danny's vital signs. His heart rate was elevated but steady. His core temperature was already starting to drop. She opened a channel to Jake. "Commander," she said quietly, "you should see this." Danny moved across the ice field like he was born to it. Each step was careful and deliberate. He tested the surface before putting his full weight down. The avalanche had settled, but it was not stable. One wrong move could trigger another collapse or send him sliding into a hidden crevasse. Jake arrived at the avalanche site and stood beside Vrenthor. Both leaders watched the small figure moving across the ice. "He's going to die," Jake said quietly. "Yes," Vrenthor agreed. His voice held something that might have been respect. "But he goes with honor." The wind was howling now, a constant scream that cut through every layer of clothing. The temperature had dropped to 40 below zero and was still falling. Danny's exposed face was already turning red from the cold. Ice formed in his eyebrows and on the edges of his hood. He reached the center of the avalanche field and knelt down. From his pack, he pulled out the scanning device he had taken from the equipment shed. It was an older model, designed for finding structural weaknesses in mine shafts. He swept it slowly across the ice, reading the patterns beneath the surface. The colony's main scanners had shown the nursery collapsed and the children scattered. But those scanners were designed to find large objects. Danny's scanner was different. It could map air pockets and structural voids. It showed him where the ice was solid and where there were gaps. He found what he was looking for. About 15 meters to his left, the scanner showed a triangular void, a space where support beams had caught the weight of the ice above them. He marked the location with a glow stick and moved on, mapping the entire field. Amy watched her monitor. Danny's core temperature had dropped 2 degrees. His fingers would be going numb soon. "Danny!" she called over the radio. "Your temp is dropping. You need to come back and warm up." His voice came back broken by static and wind. "Can't stop. Need to map the voids while I can still think straight." It took him 40 minutes to map the entire avalanche field. He placed glow sticks at 6 locations where his scanner showed possible air pockets. Then he studied the pattern they made, calculating the best approach path. The nursery had been a single large room with reinforced walls and ceiling. When the avalanche hit, the structure had not been crushed flat. Instead, it had broken into sections. Those sections had created spaces, pockets of air where the children might have survived. The trick was finding which pockets still had living children and which were already tombs. Danny chose the void that was closest to where the center of the nursery had been. He pulled out his plasma torch and began cutting into the ice. The torch melted through frozen water and compacted snow, creating a narrow shaft that angled down toward the void below. The work was slow and exhausting. The plasma torch was designed for cutting metal, not for excavating ice. It kept overheating, forcing Danny to stop and let it cool. While he waited, the wind tried to freeze him solid. He did stretches to keep his blood moving, knowing that if he stayed still too long, his muscles would stiffen and fail. Jake watched through binoculars. He's been out there over an hour. His body can't take much more of this. Sarah Lynn stood beside him now, her eyes fixed on the small human shape. Why does he do this? His pack leaders told him to stop. He knows he will die. Why does he continue? Jake lowered the binoculars. Because that's what humans do. We're stubborn. We don't quit, even when quitting is the smart choice. "This is foolishness," Vrenthor said, but his tone was not critical. It was thoughtful. And yet it is also brave. "Your species confuses me, human commander." "We confuse ourselves too," Jake admitted. Danny broke through into the first void. He widened the hole enough to fit his body through, then tied off his climbing rope and lowered himself down. The shaft he had cut was barely wide enough for his shoulders. Ice scraped his jacket on both sides. If he got stuck here, he would freeze to death in minutes. He dropped into the void and turned on his headlamp. The beam cut through darkness, showing him a triangular space about 6 feet high and 10 feet wide. Support beams from the nursery ceiling had created a tent-like structure. Beneath them was ice and debris. The void was empty. No children. Danny's heart sank, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had marked 6 possible locations. This was just the first one. He climbed back up, pulled himself out of the shaft, and moved to the next glow stick. His fingers were numb now. He had to look at them to make sure they were gripping the torch properly. His face had no feeling at all. Ice had formed on his beard and eyebrows, making his head feel heavy. The second void took another 40 minutes to reach. Danny's movements were slower now. The cold was sapping his strength. His core temperature had dropped 3 degrees. Amy kept calling him, begging him to come back, but he no longer responded. Either his radio had frozen or he was ignoring her. The second void was also empty. So was the third. Danny rested for 2 minutes between each attempt, forcing himself to eat an energy bar even though he was not hungry. His body needed fuel to fight the cold. The fourth void was different. When his scanner swept over it, he saw movement. Something was alive down there. Danny forgot his exhaustion and attacked the ice with renewed energy. The plasma torch cut faster now, fueled by desperate hope. He broke through and lowered himself down. His headlamp beam swept across the space, and there they were. 23 Kelrath cubs huddled together in a living ball of fur. 4 human children pressed into the center of the pile, kept warm by the cubs' body heat. They had survived by instinct. The Kelrath cubs had done what their ancestors had done for millions of years. When the pack was threatened, when the young were in danger, they clustered together and shared warmth. The human children were smaller and more vulnerable to cold, so the cubs had wrapped around them, forming a protective barrier with their bodies. "Found them," Danny said into his radio. His voice was hoarse and shaking. "All of them. They're alive." At the surface, the news spread like electricity. Kelrath and humans pressed forward. Sarah Lynn's howl split the night, but this time it was not grief. It was hope. Danny dropped down into the void and moved among the children. Some of the cubs were conscious and looked at him with frightened amber eyes. Others were unconscious, their breathing shallow. The human children were in worse shape. Sophie Grant had a broken arm. Marcus Bell was so cold he had stopped shivering, which was a very bad sign. The Chen twins were awake but could not speak through chattering teeth. Danny pulled out thermal blankets and began wrapping the smallest children. He activated chemical heat packs and pressed them against the cubs who were unconscious. He checked pulses and breathing, doing quick medical assessments. They were alive, but barely. The temperature in the void was just above freezing, sustained by their combined body heat, but that heat was fading. They had maybe 30 minutes before hypothermia claimed them. 30 minutes to get 27 children up a narrow shaft, across an unstable ice field and back to the colony. Danny triggered his emergency beacon, knowing it would never penetrate 30 meters of ice. No help was coming. He was on his own. He looked at the children, counting them again. 27 lives depending on him. 27 reasons to do the impossible. "Okay," he said to himself, "let's get you home." He pulled out his climbing rope and began rigging a pulley system using the support beams above. It was crude but functional. He would have to haul them up one at a time. The shaft was too narrow to carry anyone. Each child would have to be lifted in a harness while Danny climbed beside them, guiding them through the tight space. He started with Sophie because her broken arm needed immediate medical attention. He wrapped her in a thermal blanket, secured her in the climbing harness, and began the slow process of hauling her up through the shaft. She whimpered in pain every time her arm bumped the ice. Danny talked to her constantly, keeping her focused, keeping her calm. It took 15 minutes to get Sophie to the surface. Kelrath hands reached down and pulled her up the last few feet. Sarah Lynn gathered the little girl in her arms and ran toward the medical center. The crowd parted to let her through. Danny went back down for Marcus Bell. Then the Chen twins, one at a time. The human children were lighter and easier to maneuver through the narrow shaft. But each trip took energy he did not have and time that was running out. After the human children came the cubs. They were heavier, their bodies dense with muscle even in youth. Some could climb with Danny's guidance, gripping the ice with their small claws. Others were too weak or too young and had to be hauled up like dead weight. The 5th cub got stuck halfway up the shaft. Danny had to climb up beside her. wedging himself into an impossible position to push her through. Something in his ribs gave way with a sharp crack. Pain bloomed across his chest, making it hard to breathe. He kept climbing. The 8th cub was unconscious. Danny had to tie the harness around the small body and haul dead weight up through the shaft. His hands were bleeding now. The gloves had torn away on sharp ice during the 5th rescue. His bare fingers gripped frozen rope, leaving red smears on the white surface. Each pull on the rope sent fire through his cracked ribs. Danny learned to breathe in short, shallow gasps that did not move his chest too much. The pain was constant but manageable if he did not think about it. He thought instead about the next cub, the next pull, the next foot of progress. At the surface, Frenthor organized the Kelrath into teams. Some carried children to the medical center. Others prepared more thermal blankets and heat packs. A few tried to help Danny, but the shaft was too narrow. Only one person could fit through it. The Kelrath could only wait and watch as the small human made trip after trip into the darkness. Amy monitored her scanner with growing alarm. Danny's core temperature was down to 89 degrees. That was hypothermia territory, where the body started shutting down to preserve vital organs. His heart rate was erratic. His movements on the scanner were slower, less coordinated. "Danny," she called over the radio, "you need to stop and warm up. Your body is shutting down, no response." He was either too focused to answer or too cold to work the radio anymore. Jake stood beside her, watching the medical teams work on the children as they emerged. Sophie's broken arm was being set. Marcus Bell was in a warming pod, slowly being brought back from the edge of hypothermia. The Chen twins were drinking hot broth and crying with relief. The cubs were responding to treatment too. Kelrath physiology was more resistant to cold than human, but they had been down there for hours. Several were suffering from frostbite on their paws and ear tips. One small male had stopped breathing twice but had been revived. They would all survive, the doctor said. Thanks to the human. The 9th cub came up, then the 10th. Danny climbed down and back up, down and back up. The repetition became mechanical. Harness the child. Climb up, hand them off. Climb back down. His body moved on autopilot while his mind drifted. He saw his grandfather standing in the ice, the old man's weathered face smiling. "Good job, boy. Keep going." Danny blinked and the vision disappeared. He was hallucinating now. That was bad. That meant his brain was not getting enough oxygen or was too cold to function properly. The 12th cub was a tiny black-furred female. She was not breathing when Danny reached her. He felt for a pulse and found a faint flutter. No time to bring her up first. He started CPR right there in the void, breathing life into her small lungs, pushing on her chest with careful precision. The cub gasped and mewed. Danny almost cried with relief. He wrapped her in his last thermal blanket and began the climb. This one was special. He held her close to his chest, using his body heat to keep her warm. Each movement jarred his broken ribs, but he ignored it. Halfway up the shaft, his left ankle twisted in a hidden crevice. Something tore. Pain shot up his leg like lightning. Danny bit down on a scream and kept climbing. He could not stop. If he stopped, he would not start again. His body would freeze in this shaft and the remaining children would die. He emerged from the hole and handed the small cub to Sarah Lynn. The Kelrath mother pressed the cub against her chest, feeling the heartbeat, crying tears that froze instantly on her fur. "You brought her back," she whispered. "You brought my daughter back." Danny did not have energy to respond. He turned and climbed back down. 13th cub, 14th, 15th. The numbers blurred together. Danny's world shrank to simple tasks. Grab the rope, pull, breathe, ignore the pain, repeat. His hands no longer looked like hands. They were red and black, flesh torn to bone in places. He could not feel them anymore. He had to watch them to make sure they were gripping the rope. Sometimes they slipped and he would slide down a few feet before catching himself. The 16th cub could climb on his own but was too frightened. Danny had to coax him up, talking in a voice that was barely a whisper. "Come on, little guy. Your mom is waiting. Just a bit further. You can do it." The cub whimpered but followed Danny's lead. They climbed together, the human and the alien child, both fighting against the cold and exhaustion. At the surface, the entire colony was gathered now. Humans and Kelrath stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the shaft. Every time Danny emerged with another child, a cheer went up, and every time he climbed back down, the crowd fell silent. hardly daring to breathe until they saw him again. Jake had stopped giving orders. There was nothing left to command. Everyone was doing what needed to be done. He simply stood and watched, witnessing something he would never forget. "How is he still moving?" Brenthor asked. The pack leader's voice held awe. "I don't know," Jake admitted. "He should be dead already." Sarah Lynn approached them, still holding her rescued daughter. "He moves because they need him. The pack needs him, so he does not stop." 17th cub. 18th. Danny's vision was tunneling now. He could only see straight ahead, everything else fading to gray. His body was shutting down, preserving the last bits of energy for essential functions. His fingers would not bend anymore. He had to loop the rope around his wrists and pull with his arms. The 19th cub was stuck under a fallen beam. Danny had to shift debris to free him. Each piece of rubble felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His muscles screamed in protest. His broken ribs ground together with every movement. He got the cub free and started the climb. Halfway up, Danny's left leg gave out completely. The twisted ankle could not bear weight anymore. He pulled himself up with his arms alone, dragging his useless leg behind him. 20th cub. 21st. 22nd. The void below was emptying. Danny could see the end now. Just a few more. He could make it. He had to make it. His mother appeared in the shaft below him. She looked just like she had before the accident that took her life 5 years ago. "Rest, Danny, you've done enough." "Not yet," Danny whispered through cracked lips. "Almost done." She smiled sadly and faded away. The 23rd cub was the last of the Kelrath children. A small gray-furred male with bright blue eyes. He was weak but conscious. He wrapped his small arms around Danny's neck as they climbed together. "Thank you," the cub whispered in broken human language. "Thank you for not leaving us." Danny could not respond. He had no words left. He just climbed. At the surface, Brenthor himself took the last cub from Danny's arms. The pack leader looked into the human's eyes and saw something that transcended species. He saw pure determination, the kind that refused to acknowledge defeat even when defeat was inevitable. Danny stood there swaying, his body barely able to remain upright. But he turned back toward the shaft. There were still 4 more children down there. The cubs who had been too weak to climb on their own. He had left them for last because they would be the hardest to move. 4 more, he said. His voice was barely audible over the wind. Amy grabbed his arm. "Danny, you can't. Your body is shutting down. We'll send someone else." He looked at her with eyes that did not quite focus. "The shaft is too narrow. Only I can fit. 4 more." He pulled free from her grip and climbed back down into the darkness. Jake watched him disappear and shook his head. "He's going to die down there." "Yes," Brenthor agreed. But now there was something else in his voice. Something like reverence. "He will die saving the last of our cubs. There is no greater honor." Danny reached the void and found the 4 remaining cubs. They were barely alive, their breathing so shallow it was hard to detect. He wrapped them in every remaining piece of warm cloth he had. Then he began the final climbs. 24th cub. His vision went black twice on the way up. He kept climbing blind, feeling for handholds, pulling himself up through pure muscle memory. 25th cub. His heart stopped for 3 seconds. He felt it happen, felt the pause, then felt it start again with a painful thud. His body was breaking down completely now. 26th cub. Danny could no longer feel his hands or feet. He climbed using his forearms and knees, dragging the cub behind him. Blood from his torn hands made the rope slippery. 1 more. Just 1 more. He climbed down 1 final time. The last cub was the smallest, a tiny thing with white fur. Danny picked her up and held her close. "We're going home," he whispered to her. "Stay with me." The climb was impossible. Danny's body had nothing left to give. But he climbed anyway, fueled by something beyond physical strength. Every human instinct screamed at him to stop, to rest, to give up. He ignored them all. His grandfather was with him again. His mother, too. They climbed beside him, not helping but bearing witness. Danny knew they were not real, but their presence gave him comfort. He emerged from the shaft for the last time. The small white cub clutched against his chest. Hands reached for them both. The cub was taken to safety. Danny tried to take a step forward and collapsed. He did not feel himself hit the ice. He did not feel Brenthor catch him before he struck the ground. He just felt relief. They were all safe. All 27 of them. He had kept his promise. Frenthor caught Danny before he hit the ice. The massive Kelrath cradled the small human in his arms like he would carry his own cub. Danny's eyes were closed, his face white as snow. His breathing was so shallow it was almost invisible. "Medical team now," Jake shouted, running toward them. They placed Danny on a stretcher. Amy ran beside it as they carried him toward the medical center, her scanner beeping urgent warnings. Core temperature 87 degrees, heart rate dangerously slow, multiple injuries, severe frostbite. His body was shutting down, trying to protect what little life remained. The Kelrath followed in silence. Every cub Danny had saved was there, carried by their parents or walking on their own. They formed a procession behind the stretcher, a living testament to what one human had done. In the medical center, doctors worked with desperate efficiency. They cut away Danny's frozen clothes. His hands were destroyed, flesh black and torn. 3 toes on his left foot were dead from frostbite. His ribs were cracked in 4 places. His ankle was shattered. Cuts and bruises covered his body, but he was alive. Barely, impossibly, stubbornly alive. They placed him in a warming pod, slowly raising his body temperature. Too fast would kill him. Too slow would not save him. The doctors walked a knife's edge, fighting for every degree. Jake stood outside the medical room, watching through the window. Amy stood beside him, still holding her scanner, even though there was nothing left to monitor from out here. "Will he make it?" Jake asked. The head doctor, a woman named Dr. Lisa Grant, came out to speak with them. She looked exhausted. "I don't know. His body should have died hours ago. The fact that he's still alive is remarkable. But the next 24 hours will decide everything. What are his chances?" Dr. Grant hesitated. 20%. Maybe less. He has severe hypothermia, multiple fractures, tissue damage, and his organs are failing. We're doing everything we can. In the waiting area, every human in the colony had gathered. The parents of the saved children sat together, holding each other, crying tears of grief and gratitude. Sophie's mother kept saying the same thing over and over. "He saved her. He saved my baby." The Kelrath filled the rest of the space. They did not sit. They stood in respectful silence, forming a wall of fur and solidarity. Frenthor stood at the front, Sarah Lynn beside him. Their small white-furred daughter was wrapped in a blanket, sleeping peacefully against her mother's chest. Hours passed. The night outside reached its coldest point and began the slow climb toward dawn. Inside the medical center, machines beeped and hummed. Doctors moved between beds, treating the rescued children and monitoring the human who had saved them. All 27 children were stable. The cubs were recovering well, their natural resistance to cold helping them bounce back quickly. The human children would need more time, but they would survive. All of them would go home to their families. Except possibly Danny. He was still fighting, his body struggling to hold on to life. Frenthor approached Jake as the first light of dawn colored the windows. "May I speak with you, Commander?" They walked to a quiet corner. The pack leader's expression was grave. "You're human, Danny Hayes. He has given the Kelrath a debt that can never be repaid." Jake nodded. "He saved your children. More than that." Frenthor looked toward the medical room. "He showed us something we had forgotten. We made the logical choice last night. We accepted loss to preserve the pack. It was the right choice by every measure of Kelrath wisdom." "It probably was the right choice," Jake agreed quietly. But Danny made a different choice. He refused to accept what was logical. He went into the ice alone, knowing he would likely die because he could not abandon the cubs. That is not Kelrath thinking. That is something else. That's human thinking. Sometimes we're too stubborn to know when to quit. Frenthor's amber eyes gleamed. Or perhaps you are brave enough to try when others have stopped. There is a Kelrath song, very old, about warriors who went into the frozen mountains to save lost cubs. They died trying, but the pack sang their names forever. We have not sung that song in 1,000 years because we learned that logic must rule over emotion. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Danny Hayes reminded us that sometimes love is stronger than logic. Sometimes one person refusing to surrender can change everything. Jake felt a lump in his throat. He's just a kid. A quiet kid who never wanted attention. He is pack now, Frenthor said firmly. If he lives, the Kelrath will honor him until the stars grow cold. If he dies, we will sing his name in the death songs of heroes. Either way, he will never be forgotten. As they spoke, movement came from the medical room. Dr. Grant emerged, pulling off her surgical gloves. Her expression was carefully neutral. Jake's heart sank. That neutral face was the one doctors wore when delivering bad news. He prepared himself for words he did not want to hear. Then Dr. Grant smiled. It was a small, tired, genuine smile. He's stable. Core temperature is back to 95 degrees. Heart rate is steady. He's still critical, but I think he's going to make it. The waiting room erupted. Humans cheered. Kelrath howled, but this time it was the sound of joy. Sarah Lynn pressed her forehead against Vrenthor's chest and cried. Jake felt his knees go weak. Can I see him? For a moment. He's not conscious yet, but you can look. Jake entered the medical room. Danny lay in the warming pod, covered in blankets and connected to a dozen machines. His face was still pale, his hands wrapped in bandages, but his chest rose and fell with steady breaths. You crazy, stubborn kid, Jake whispered. You actually did it. Danny's eyes flickered open just for a second. They focused on Jake's face. Got them all, he whispered. His voice was barely audible. Yeah, son, you got them all. Danny's eyes closed again and he slipped back into healing sleep. Outside, Vrenthor was organizing something. The Kelrath formed lines, creating a corridor from the medical center to the main plaza. As the sun rose fully, casting golden light across the ice, they began to sing. It was not the morning song. It was something older, deeper. The Song of Life Debt, a harmony that bound the Kelrath to another across generations. They sang for Danny Hayes, the human who had walked into death and brought their children home. The song carried across the valley, echoing off the mountains. Every Kelrath in the colony added their voice. Cubs sang with their parents. Warriors sang with workers. For the first time in 3,000 years of Kelrath history, the Life Debt song was sung for someone who was not Kelrath. Days passed. Danny remained in the medical center, slowly healing. His hands would bear scars for life. He would walk with a slight limp. The doctors said he would never regain full feeling in 3 fingers of his left hand. But he would live. He would go home. He would have a future. The children visited him. Sophie drew him pictures of flowers. Marcus and the Chen twins brought him cookies from the colony kitchen. The Kelrath cubs came in groups, shy and grateful, placing small gifts at his bedside, carved stones, woven bracelets, tokens of respect in their culture. Sarah Lynn came with her small white-furred daughter, the cub who had been last, who Danny had carried up in his final climb. She placed the cub in the bed beside Danny, letting her curl against his side. She has taken you as pack father, Sarah Lynn explained. In Kelrath culture, this is the highest honor. You will always be part of her family now. Danny looked at the small cub sleeping against him and felt something break open in his chest. Not pain, but emotion he had kept locked away for years. I don't know how to be a father. You know how to protect. You know how to sacrifice. You know how to love beyond reason. That is all a parent needs to know. 3 months later, Danny was released from the medical center. He had learned to walk again on his rebuilt ankle. His hands were still wrapped, but the doctors said they would heal. He would need therapy, but he would regain most of his function. He stepped outside into the afternoon sun, expecting to walk to his quarters alone. Instead, he found the entire colony waiting for him. Humans and Kelrath lined the path, creating a corridor of witnesses. Vrenthor stood at the end of the path. In his hands, he held a carved stone pendant on a leather cord. It was beautiful, worked with skill that had taken weeks. The symbol etched into the stone was ancient, a mark that meant protector of cubs in the oldest Kelrath language. The pack leader placed the pendant around Danny's neck. You are pack brother now, he said in a voice that carried to everyone present. You are protector of cubs. You are the one who taught us that sometimes courage means refusing to accept the impossible. He placed his massive hand over Danny's heart, directly above the pendant. The pack will never forget. Every Kelrath in the colony raised their voices in the Life Debt song. The humans joined in, humming the harmony they had learned. The sound filled the valley, carried on the cold wind, a promise that would echo across generations. Danny stood there, this quiet kid from the Appalachian Mountains who had never wanted attention, surrounded by the lives he had saved. Tears froze on his cheeks, but they were good tears. I just did what anyone would do, he said quietly. Vrenthor shook his massive head. No, small human. You did what no one else would do. You walked into the ice when everyone else had turned away. You carried our children home when we had given them up for lost. That is not what anyone would do. That is what a hero does. The story spread across Kelrath space like wildfire. Every pack den, every colony, every shipley.